Welcome to Joe's Happy Hour, a show about markets and life hosted by Joe Fahmy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be regarded as personalized investment advice or relied upon for any investment decisions. Joe Fahmy is an employee of Zor Capital, and he and his clients may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. All opinions expressed by Joe are solely his own and do not reflect the opinions of Zor Capital. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Charlie Gasparino.
Hey, Joe. By the way, stand up, please.
Yeah.
Don't give the audience the wrong impression.
That's the book. Go woke, go broke. It just says go woke, so everyone tuning in is going to think I'm promoting wokeness.
So just so you know, it reminds me, I did a podcast with Bridget Fedesi, and she says, "Well, Charlie, tell me about your book. Tell me what this book's about." I said, "Well, it's not exactly a positive book on wokeness," and she goes, "Well, that would be great if it was, wouldn't it? All the great things that came out of everybody going woke and losing their minds and dyeing their hair red and cutting their genitals off. I mean, wouldn't that be a wonderful book?"
That'd be a great book to promote. Quick intro. Senior correspondent, Fox Business, Fox News.
Right.
We've been great friends for a while. I appreciate your mentorship. And you've written Wall Street Journal, New York Post.
I'm a regular columnist.
Columnist for the Post.
I write book reviews for the Journal mainly.
Okay. And you've written, this is your sixth book.
Yep.
Go woke, go broke.
Right.
That's what the shirt is, but it says "Go Broke" underneath for people who opt in late. Sixth book, 2 New York Times bestsellers, but
Right. 2 national bestsellers. Just so you know, I'm on one of them. I missed the Times list, just to be perfectly honest.
To be technical,
because they hate conservative books, and because it wasn't sold in private bookstores. I missed the Times list, but I made the other national.
Can I go back and buy 100 copies to knock you over the list?
People do that. People do. I've never done that. Maybe I should start doing it.
Yeah, you'll have a basement full of books. But what's interesting is, so you've written 5 books. You still write actively, prolifically, amazing and all, but then you took 10 years off from your 5th book to this one.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write this book?
Well,
to get back into the writing?
First off, it's hard, right?
Well, yeah, there's a huge difference between a column and a book, so
Right.
of course.
And these, I mean, as you know, a lot of people do these books about investing. And, you know, that's easy, you know, in my view. Okay, I mean, you got to put some time into it. You got to make sure you write it right. But, you know, this is a reported out book. I mean, I actually called everybody. I sat down with Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, and I spent hours with him, much to his chagrin. But, you know, no, he's
former CEO of McDonald's. You sat down with all these people.
I sat down with him, Ed Renzi. Spent a lot of time with the people at Disney, doing fact checking and talking to them about all the stuff that happened with Disney, because Disney's a major player in this book, as you know, because it opposed first off, it's a very woke company, both under Bob Iger and then Bob Chapek. But the story of how they went woke is sort of interesting, and how they had to unwoke themselves, and why. There's a consumer backlash against all their policies, how they've, you know, essentially, you know, were promoting, you know, left-wing gender ideology in their children's programming, and there was a backlash to that. And then the wokeness there reached, I guess, its high point. Apogee, is that the high point? Apogee.
Yeah.
When Bob Chapek, who succeeded Iger, came in there and opposed the Florida sex law to not teach sex education and then gender fluidity to toddlers, and Disney opposed it. And it was the wrong thing to do. It didn't end well. I get into all that. I also got into heavily the stuff at Budweiser with Dylan Mulvaney, the trans activists that for some reason they thought it was a great idea to have a trans woman in a bubble bath, half naked, sipping a Bud Light.
A bunch of guys who drink Budweiser. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I mean, that's really like what I'm looking for. You're sitting back, you know, and you're got your easy chair with a Bud, and there's Dylan Mulvaney giggling about whatever.
Yeah, know your audience, people.
Anyway, I spent a lot of time with them, and I interviewed a lot of people. I interviewed average people that work at these companies that went woke and what it was like being there, being indoctrinated with critical race theory. So my bigger point is, like, you know, when you do a book like that, you actually have to report it. You have to fact check it, because you could get sued.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you got all you did it right. And so it's not easy, but this, you know, the topic sort of, you know, it was like a kind of a perfect storm. So I was covering banks, particularly the regional banking crisis. You remember when Silicon Valley Bank blew up?
Yes.
In particular, but others. And I was on the forefront of that, which is, pretty much straight finance business reporting. I was breaking a lot of stories. Part of the Silicon Valley Bank blow up was how their risk management, for some reason, was obsessed with wokeness and ESG and diversity and DEI, like more so than they cared about the balance sheet, which obviously wasn't too healthy, right?
Right, yeah.
There was a whole interest rate move which took their balance sheet into being from the black to the red, and they didn't prepare for it. They had assets that were mainly treasury bonds that were underwater as the Fed was raising rates. Simple story. It started. This is when Silicon Valley started. Particularly the NASDAQ started to shake a little bit back in 2022, 2023 because of the higher rates. A lot of startup VC firms started getting squirrely, going out of business.
Because they had their money in these banks.
So think about it. Their business models were starting to implode because people were cutting back on funding the early stage VC tech companies.
Sure.
They had their money in these banks. The rumors spread that they were pulling it out. It was a classic bank run, and then everybody ran to pull it out. And that caused Silicon Valley Bank and others. And then what was true is that their balance sheets they definitely had an asset liability mismatch. So treasury bonds pay out 100 cents on a dollar, right?
Sure.
If you hold them to maturity. But none of these banks, if you think about it, it's a mark-to-market basis, right?
Correct.
If the Fed is raising rates, if the 10-year rate is starting to spike, you had an inverted yield curve, you essentially, or a sloping up yield curve, right? Long rates are going up. You're basically, your treasury bonds prices are going down. So therefore,
inversely related.
Yeah. So therefore, if you ask for your money back, we don't have the money. That's what happened. But they weren't paying attention to this. They were doing diversity and ESG. I knew a guy that worked there, so I made a pitch on that. How a bank blew up because of wokeness.
They're more focused on
right.
other.
So then when I sat down, the publisher says, "Yeah, we want to, we love to do that." But did you see this thing at Budweiser? That's when Dylan Mulvaney was like the same day. Oh, and did you see the stuff that's going on with Disney? They're at war with Ron DeSantis over opposing this law, and it was like, and you see what's going on at BlackRock, which is the big ESG, which is it's a woke investing style, environmental social governance. Oh God, it's losing assets.
All of a sudden it's a domino effect of all these different stories.
Package it, and that's what I did.
Okay.
In a narrative that kind of the trick is to write it like a narrative that it flows, that there's some sort of continuity between all, and that's what I tried to do. I got a good review in the journal that said
it's amazing timing because this was all happening, like you said, you're looking into the Silicon Valley Bank and then all of a sudden then Disney and all this other stuff comes in, and then it's also perfect timing with the election too because it's been a big topic around the election time.
Trump was decidedly not woke this time. No, he was never woke, but he's like really not woke. And it kind of foreshadowed. So the last quarter of the book is the unraveling of woke. And it's unraveling, but it's not dead yet. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, people talking about getting rid of all these.
I thought DEI stood for Donald, ended it.
Yeah. Well, there is a chapter called DEI or Die.
I know.
You can do that. But, it's not dead yet, but the last quarter of the book, it's how it's unraveling, and part of that is Trump. Now, the book was written before Trump was elected. You should know.
Yes.
So, but we did foreshadow that he could win in this.
So, quick question I have: like you said, you covered the chronological all of these stories, and I think to the layperson, when they think of businesses that have been hurt, you do think of Bud Light, Budweiser. You think of Disney.
Target.
You think of Target. Those are the first three that came to my mind, and then you cover all of them in the book. Was there any one in particular that stuck out to you where you said, wow, this is like, what were they thinking? Like, was there any one or two that you just said, this is like, like with Bud Light, for example, your audience, but you're not catering to your audience.
I think all of them. I think, when the funny thing is when you write these things, you say like, especially when you look at it in retrospect, you're like, what the hell they think? Like Larry Fink is a really smart guy, the guy that runs BlackRock.
That's my favorite chapter because of the title.
What?
Larry Fink's title. I have it marked here.
Who the fuck are these people?
Yeah, who the fuck are these people? Yeah, that's right here. Who the fuck are these people? That's my favorite.
Well, because he started getting trolled by conservatives. So, like, what I don't understand why Larry's a smart guy and he created this business from zero. ESG shouldn't be why, BlackRock. I mean, BlackRock is a major money manager for a lot more than that.
Right.
But there was like a period of time where he started like going nuts on ESG. Like he became the high priest of diversity. I'm going to make my corporate, my managers are going to get paid based on how many intersectional people they hire. We're going to do ESG screening, environmental social governance screening, not just on people for portfolios that want it. It's going to be across our investment management style.
So it's not just hiring; it's actual investments.
And then instead of just not saying anything about it, he went on like a years long. He was like the Billy Graham of ESG. And then thinking back, I mean, just one thing I know, like if you're going to do that, be prepared to be the target of the conservative movement as something that I've covered and, written about, know these folks. They are activists and they will hold you accountable and that's part of what we're getting now. And so I that to me was sort of fascinating because I was like, what the hell got in his head? But, listen, this has never happened to me and it's probably never happened to you. I've never been adored by the media. Like no one's ever said, well, every day you're just so great and go to conferences and everybody's like, you're brilliant. You're changing the world for better.
In person, they love you, but behind the keyboard, they're not exactly friendly.
Who knows? I mean, I'm just saying they're not neither way, but I'm just saying that, that's not what I do. It's not what most people are not adored. But he in the beginning when he went there, he became a media darling. The Deal Book would have him at his conferences, and they'd slobber all over him. And I'm sure it felt good to get those headlines. So he didn't see the backlash coming. And when it came really hard. And that's that chapter, Who the Fuck Are These People?
Yeah.
He wakes up one day while he's at the office, and he sees this big mural in front of BlackRock saying, who is Larry Fink, with an ugly face, and they distorted his face, and
with the website to go to,
and it was like how he's destroying America, how he's causing, and this was like in 2022, 2023, when we had a spike in oil prices, so they were blaming ESG on environmental social governance investing on higher oil prices because it basically told oil companies not to drill for oil, but build windmills, which is true, but it pinned it on him, and so he became this sort of political symbol of the downside of wokeness. So, that kind of, to me, because I know the guy so well, and he's smart and nice and he's a good guy.
Yeah.
I can't believe he went there, that no one pulled him back. But so that startled me. But if you're looking for just raw weirdness, it has to be Dylan Mulvaney in a bubble bath. I mean, Budweiser. When I was a kid, I used to drink Bud, right? So, but and I remember the Spud McKenzie commercials.
Yeah.
And bunch of hot girls in bikinis walking around.
They always had clever Super Bowl commercials and stuff.
It was really, but it was kind of man-ish.
It's your audience.
What do they call non-binary, right? Is that the word for it?
I don't know. Just
I can't
rednecks
remember.
drinking beer.
Is it binary or non-binary that means straight guys? But anyway, cisgender. This was Bud. This was their brand. And then all of a sudden, one day, someone gets the idea, and it's more complicated than just someone, just so you know. Someone gets the idea that we should put a trans activist, not just any trans person, a trans activist, a flamboyant trans activist who's got a gazillion views on YouTube and this one and TikTok, and put her half naked in a bubble bath. Do one spot like that, another spot drinking a beer, dressed like Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's with the pearls and the black dress, talking about March Madness. It was like a promo for the March Madness, and it was so bad. And that to me, for sheer weirdness, if you know anything about Bud, to me, took the cake. Now, what I did was I unraveled that. Like, why did it go there? Now, it's more simple. Budweiser at the time, because I covered it, tried to blame it on some wayward, woke marketing executive. And when you go, and first off, the marketing executive they tried to blame it on, the two of them were very good marketing executives. They won awards. One of them did that great Game of Thrones Budweiser ad at the Super Bowl.
Okay.
I mean, it was like really inventive stuff. She did. It was. What else did they do? They did the Miles Teller dancing with the dog at the Super Bowl with a bud. I mean, it was like good stuff. You know, how do they go from that to this? It's not just one day they woke up and said, "Oh, let's get a trans person and put him in a bubble bath." There was a corporate directive involving DEI to essentially get more influencers, which they were using a lot, and make sure they met an intersectional matrix.
Going back to Larry Fink, did he tell you what was there pressure on him to do this? Like, did it come from a younger, group in the company?
He didn't have to tell me. He conceded. Some of the pressure was, so if you know how much money these guys make managing pension fund money, public pension fund money, in the up until I would say 2020, most of the growth in public pension fund money was from blue states, New York, California, obviously, CalSTRS, New York, the New York State Pension Fund, Illinois, and these are run by woke public officials. New York, it would be the controller of the state, who's a Democrat and very woke. Illinois, whoever that is, Massachusetts, whoever that is, California,
all blue states,
all blue states. I mean, the people that run CalSTRS are elected officials and appointed people who are very woke. They also demand ESG. So to get those gazillions of dollars of business, BlackRock went. I mean, that's part of the rationale for going all in on ESG.
They have to conform to keep them happy.
Now think about what happened though in 2020. You had the lockdowns. You had the George Floyd riots, and you had a mass exodus out of all those places. California went to Texas, New York went to Florida. Tennessee, and you have a population decline of those states, population increase in red states, which became redder. Texas became redder, as you know from the last election. Florida is definitely redder. Tennessee is very red. And pension power started to shift to the red states. So they started boycotting Fink and BlackRock. And it became, and he lost
major backfire.
He lost $1 trillion in assets in those years.
So you're trying to please the woke
and it backfired.
Pension, but the other one said we're taking our money.
I mean, he didn't see the potential for the backlash, both on a personal level. As I mentioned, he became like the symbol of the anti-woke movement, and from a business standpoint.
Where is this pressure coming from, though? Is it like some human resources, some younger consultants that they hire? Like, where's the pressure coming from?
From Larry?
Whether it's him or Bud Light, those commercials.
Well, first off, Fink was ESG was a moneymaker. A lot of the pressure came. Yes, there is a corporate infrastructure for DEI and stuff like this, and a lot of this is the type of person that's in these chairs and these CEO chairs. It's not the old Jack Welch guys that are very shareholder. The shareholder capitalism. They threw out shareholder capitalism. The corporate something called the Business Roundtable. It was run by Jamie Dimon at the time, the best banker in the world at J.P. Morgan Chase. So we're all no longer going to just like care about the shareholders. We are serving the world. So we got to make a world a better place. We got to increase diversity. We got to do this, do that. Do ESG. That was one of the main levers that sort of institutionalized wokeness on a corporate level. In addition, Davos plays a huge role. It's if you know anything about Davos, I just came back from it. It's less woke this year because times are changing, but it always was a sort of like petri dish of various woke policies, corporatism, ESG, you name it. And so, put all that together. The guys that actually run Budweiser, it's not Budweiser. Anheuser-Busch, the old Bush family, they sold it to AB InBev, I think, in 2009.
Correct, yeah.
And they cashed out, and they became, enormously rich. I think it was a $60 billion deal. The guys that run AB InBev are woke. They're Davos people. They're a bunch of Brazilians and Belgians. This is not like an American company, you know what I'm saying? and they take their cues from Davos. I have a whole section in there about the head of AB InBev talking about how great ESG is and this and that and diversity and quotas and you name it. By the way, I'm not against diversity. I mean, you aren't either.
No.
I mean, DEI takes diversity in a different way. Like most people think oh, yes, let's hire some diverse people. Of course.
Yeah.
They have to be qualified, but let's reach out to certain communities.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about.
No.
We're talking about literally 50%, 20%, no white guys anymore here. You have to meet these metrics. We have an officer meeting those metrics. You don't meet those metrics, you get fired. By the way, we're having critical race theory seminars where we're teaching white people you're bad. I mean, this is all true. It
Right.
all happened.
And they took it to basically Biden's entire cabinet, kind of.
Well, he was the DEI candidate. The biggest. I should point out, he was probably even more so than Obama. Although DEI was and that sort of stuff did resonate in the Obama administration, but he took it to another level. He actually. It just shows you what a moron the guy is. If you're going to do this, you probably keep your mouth shut. But he actually said he appointed his vice president based on DEI. Yeah. He actually said he's going to go out and get a Supreme Court justice who's a black woman.
Yeah.
Not the best person. I mean, he could have just left all that out, but he didn't because he was virtue signaling. And it obviously, in the end, I think it hurt Kamala Harris in the end.
Well, the public voted with how they felt.
Yeah, but not only that, I mean, it was hard for her to kick that label, and he fucked her in a major way.
Yeah. You mentioned again towards the end of the book about the unraveling. Is DEI dead, or is it?
No, it's not. Listen, a lot of companies are dumping it. A lot of people are taking out the name DEI. And they're just replacing it
because
with
more and more companies, Google recently, more and more
that's
companies
what I say.
Are coming out.
But read the fine print.
Yeah,
the fine print, kind of is written very wishy-washy. Here's what I think, and many companies are all in still. J.P. Morgan, BlackRock is, even though they're moving away from ESG on a corporate level, they still employ DEI. Costco, Microsoft, Apple, these are big companies. They're still involved in this. And here's what I think they're betting, my view. They're betting that there are cases that, as you know, the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action in college admissions is illegal, right? It's unconstitutional. They base that on a reading on their, sort of a straight reading of Article 6 of the Civil Rights Act. You can't discriminate based on race or whatever in public accommodations. There's something known as Title VII, which involves employment. It's written almost the same way. You would think that if they ruled that way on Title VI, they're definitely going to rule on Title VII, and there's going to be a case that's going to be brought to them probably this year. I mean, I spoke with Jonathan Turley at George Washington. He told me there are cases that are going there. But the problem is it may not be analogous, and here's why DEI could stay around. First off, the Roberts Court, John Roberts is the Chief Justice. There's a 6-3 conservative majority. You would think affirmative action is dead, but Roberts himself believes in judicial restraint. He may not want to go so far as to completely kill preferences in hiring in the workforce. Or just put the last nail in the coffin of this whole DEI stuff, and because he's got that in him, he voted with the Democrats on not overturning Obamacare, as you recall.
Right.
So remember, there's something in him that people are wondering. I wonder if he's going to go that far. He's going to chicken out on this. Kavanaugh is a conservative. Theoretically, he was another Trump 1 appointee. Roberts was a Bush appointee, I believe.
Yes.
Kavanaugh often votes on difficult things with Roberts. Gorsuch, people consider him very conservative, but he'll surprise you at times and veer left. So, you could see this thing not working out as people think, and I believe. Well, I've spoken with a lot of people at the corporate level. They think that it's different than in the college admissions, that they could still quote unquote discriminate, use DEI metrics in corporate hiring and promotion, and they think it's still legal, and they think they could win in the Supreme Court.
Wow. Okay. For people who just tuned in, it doesn't say go woke. There's a go broke at the bottom of the shirt. So I didn't want people to think this is there's more to the T-shirt than just go woke. So I have a question that you're the CEO of a company, big company, 5, 10, 20,000 employees, and you have huge products and everything. There's the famous Michael Jordan line when they asked him, why don't you speak about politics? He says, because Republicans buy sneakers too.
I wrote about it.
Right.
It involved Jesse Helms, who was a controversial senator in North Carolina. I mean, it was some criticism of him. He wouldn't engage in it.
Right. About a year ago, I saw an interview with Elon Musk where they said, okay, now you've vocalized your stance. Are you worried it's going to affect sales of Tesla, what your employees, this and that? And he said, I don't care. My question is, and I know there's no right or wrong answer. You're the CEO of a company. Are you better off keeping your mouth shut and just staying neutral, or saying, I'm going to voice my opinion, and if people don't like it, who cares?
Well, it depends. It depends on your product. I think if you have a niche product like Ben & Jerry's, you could go woke and go broke and not go broke on that easy. I think if it's much more of a mass market product, you're going to have a real problem.
Like, would Elon Musk have said that 10 years ago when he just started Tesla? Or now that he's been the only person to mass produce electric cars in the U.S., does he say, I don't care?
You know, let's just unpack this a little bit. Who does woke really apply to? It doesn't apply to the majority of Americans.
Correct.
Just so you know, it's a very, very slim. It's a slimish minority, vocal, that controls activist groups, and some of the cultural institutions like colleges, and maybe the media. But if you look at raw numbers, it's not big. So Fox News was created by Roger Ailes. Famously, he took a look at the map when Obama won, and he said, because remember, he started it in, when did he start it? It wasn't when Obama won. It was before that. It was when Clinton was still in office. So I want to say it was after Clinton won. So it was like 90. Fox News started in 95, 96. Took a picture of the United States, and as you know, Clinton was a moderate Democrat, obviously. Right? He was conservative on some issues. And he looked at this big picture of the U.S., and aside from urban areas, the whole place is red, meaning voted Republican. And he goes, see that? That's our audience. Remember, like, being non-woke like Elon is not a bad sell.
But I'm not necessarily talking about wokeness. I'm just talking about
it depends.
Political.
It depends on
voicing your political stance.
It depends. It depends, and it depends on your product. If Jamie Dimon goes totally woke, right? It's going to hurt his business, and it did. Remember when he took a knee?
Yeah,
they got a lot of backlash from that. He claims he only took a knee to fit in the picture, by the way. Remember, this was during the George Floyd riots?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he was taking a knee when he visited a branch. I don't think you can go woke profitably in most companies. I think companies that do that are just playing with fire, because there's so many alternatives to your product, and even banks these days. I think that you're smart if you stay neutral, because you want everybody's money and you kind of want to stay out of the news. But if you go right of non-woke, you could still have a business model, because most people hate this stuff. And Elon has proven it. Listen, who buys Teslas? Mostly. You did, but you're not woke. But, most people that are virtue signaling when they buy an electric car.
Yeah, it's environmentally conscious.
And just so you know, it's not very environmentally conscious.
I know.
You know why, right? I mean, I talk about it in the book.
I know. That's why I brought it up. Yeah.
To get the batteries, you got to strip mine and slave labor to get the zinc out of the ground.
I know.
And by the way, how do you produce electricity? I mean, you tell me that it's not. We don't use nuclear power, which is very environmentally sound, even though it could blow up the world. But you know what I'm saying.
Nothing wrong with that.
So, but I'm just telling you that he has a product that appeals to the left, theoretically, but still, I don't think they care about his political stuff, because
theoretically, but some people, when they heard his stance, said, "I'm returning my Tesla."
Yeah, and some people bought him.
Some bought him.
Obviously,
You're right.
Many more bought him.
Yeah,
it's going woke is a bad business model. I think, listen, I think it's always fair just to do your job. I mean, Milton Friedman created shareholder capitalism and said, listen, he didn't say, all you CEOs should be conservatives, and raise the flag. He was like, stick to your job. Your job is to, within the bounds of ethics and legality, you're not supposed to pollute the Hudson River, throw PCBs or whatever they were in the Great Lakes. But, within the bounds of ethics and legality, you're supposed to, run a business, employ people, and create value for people that your owners, your shareholders. Stay out of the politics. You'll fuck it up. And he really said that. That's where I think we should be going with this. And I think that's where people are going right now, to be honest with you. I do think that it's going to be hard to de-woke companies, harder than you think, even though you see this stuff. I mean, a lot of it's reactive to Trump, because Trump is issuing executive orders saying no more of this stuff, forget it, we're going to drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, no pronouns in the emails, all that stuff.
No more DEI in federal contracting.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of it, if you want to, and all these companies are very heavily regulated by the Federal Reserve. Or if it's the bank, it's the Federal Reserve. If it's a broadcast company. I do know that, to just give you an example, the FCC is run by a guy named Brendan Carr. He's a conservative telecom activist. He is going to examine whether CBS uses DEI in its hiring process, and he's going to throttle the Paramount deal to buy CBS. Oh, excuse me, the Skydance deal. It's an independent studio run by a very rich kid named David Ellison, whose father is a really rich dude named Larry Ellison of our Oracle. That's how he's got the money to buy Paramount. They're going to throttle that deal unless Paramount shows that CBS doesn't use DEI. Okay, that's why you have to scrub these policies, because the federal government right now is anti-DEI. So you have to do something to the policies. Also, the law, at least according to the Supreme Court on that affirmative action, is not good. That said, I think it's still going to be tough to get rid of it all, because people are betting SCOTUS may not go full unemployment, and there is a sort of corporate mindset ecosystem that veers left right now. So it's not going to go away fast. We'll see what happens. I think it's going, but it's not gone.
The timing of the book and what's going on in corporate America tied into the election.
Right.
Do you think Trump read your book and is taking some of these? Talk about the
There
influence.
There are people in his orbit that read the book. I know.
Yeah, I know. As far as the effects on current politics, the election, the administration, what are your thoughts on that, or how it tied into the election as far as all of the?
Well, I actually said this in the book, because remember, the book came out on August 4th. I said the American consumer hates wokeness. I didn't say this. I'm paraphrasing how I wrote it. How does someone like Kamala Harris, who is the epitome of wokeness over her entire career, she actually said, "I want more woke," right?
Yeah.
She said,
"Yeah,
we need more woke." She talks favorably about DEI, ESG, you name it. No more fracking. She actually said that once. How does someone like that is totally woke sell herself to the American public, which in an election year, leading up to the election, right there, rejected wokeness in every bit. I mean, let's face it. Budweiser was a number one beer, right? It went from number 1 to number 3, and it hasn't moved.
Yeah.
Bud Light, I should say. Target lost their sales. Got crushed.
Stock price got crushed.
All because they spent, it was like during a 5-year period, they were obsessed with Pride Month. So obsessed that when moms would bring their kids, if you could shop at Target, you're like a working class person. You often bring your kids in.
Sure.
Moms are coming in with their kids. They want cheap, good clothes, and they go aisles and aisles and aisles of clothing, of sort of gender fluid clothing. Some of it looks like it's for kids. They never really recovered from that. And so, that was that was rejected. I couldn't understand how Kamala Harris could win if that's being objected, and in real time, because it was like right there.
Yeah.
Now then again, she didn't run on that. Remember, she started like flip-flopping on all that stuff. But Trump just kept, rewinding the videotape. What was that great? They showed her giving her pronouns, and Kamala's for they, them, we're for you. I mean, it was a great commercial.
I remember that. Yeah. So now Trump's elected. If we can shift a little bit towards markets, because you follow. I know both of our audiences follow a lot of the markets and so forth, but you follow a lot of the tariffs and the effects on market, and a lot of the effects on corporations' earnings and everything like that. What are your thoughts currently on markets? Is it going to be more volatility? Are we back to every headline moving the markets around?
Yeah, I mean, Trump is always going to be a wild card. It's always going to be volatile. Well, let's just look at like fiscal policy under Biden. It was heavily regulated. Despite at the end they were releasing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to get down gas prices, but there was prohibitions on drilling.
Yeah,
they couldn't do a merger. They wouldn't allow any mergers, right? You'd have to go to court with them over it. I can go down the list. We're going to get a deregulated economy largely. We're going to get lower corporate taxes and maybe individual taxes. We're going to get tariffs used probably strategically to achieve ends. So you have to ask yourself, will that be good for NVIDIA's earnings? Will that be good for Apple's earnings? Will that be good for Microsoft's earnings? Will that be good for Costco's earnings?
Right, because at the end of the day, the two main drivers behind the markets are earnings and interest rates.
That's it.
However, government policy does have some effect.
No, but by the way, government policy has an effect directly on those things.
Sure.
So that's the whole thing. So Joe Biden, in many ways, forced. The Fed forced its hand doing it itself, keeping interest rates a long time at zero. But because he went nuts on fiscal spending, he forced the Fed's hand to raise rates dramatically. The whole wild card on this thing, I think, is the 10-year bond, to be honest with you. If the 10-year bond kind of stays where it is, I think we'll be fine. If the bond markets get spooked by continuing deficits, and I think that's what's good about the Doge stuff. This isn't a lot of money that, $32,000 for transgender coloring books in Ecuador. It's not going to break the bank, but when you start thinking about what the hell we're spending $32,000,
a lot of coloring books.
The funniest thing is this whole debate about Politico getting like millions of dollars for in subscriptions from the government for its political pro. Sir, I was like, why do they need political pro? What's wrong with the New York Times? And, at $50 a year, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What about $2 million to Morocco for pottery lessons when they've been doing this for 4,000 years?
This is why the Doge is so good. Like Elon is whacking this thing out. It's going to add up. And I think you have to prove to the bond market that you're serious about the deficit, which this is one of the huge problems in the Biden years. If you think about it, usually when you have a growing economy, you don't have huge deficit. We had a growing economy, and the deficit went to $2 trillion. Now, look, you have to look at it in context. The last pre-COVID budget deficit of Trump was high, but it was $900 billion. Then we went COVID, lockdowns, spent all this money. It was like $3 trillion. Biden's deficit right now is $1.82 to $2 trillion. Is going to leave Trump. That's a huge, historically huge budget deficit. Debt as a percentage of GDP. Look up the numbers. It's something like 130%. Yeah. We have $36 trillion in debt. This is bad stuff. The bond market is not going to accept that forever. Yellen did something really, I believe, egregious during the run-up to the campaign. She was literally rolling over short-term debt, so you wouldn't have to issue 10 years bonds. That would have spiked interest rates and caused, a market collapse maybe. So if Trump could do stuff to keep that 10-year stabilized, I think at 4.5% in that area, I think, I'm pretty confident.
So the Fed, for the longest period, zero interest rates after the global financial crisis. It bumped it a little bit, but then starting in 2022, for the first time in the history of the markets, they did 500 basis points in basically in a year.
Right.
And then now, so they go from 0 roughly to 5%. And now they bring it down to about 4 and change.
Is it 4.5 now?
Yeah, and that target 4.5. And they have stopped for now their rate cutting policy. Do you think the environment, to your point about what you just said, can the economy survive and be stable in that with the rates if they stay 4.5, 10-year around that, with housing, the economy, unemployment, all that?
Well, you're talking about the Fed funds rate.
Yeah.
I think, I think people think the Fed controls interest rates. It really
They affect short term, but not the.
I mean, they could affect the whole yield curve if you think about it. If they want to do what's known as QE, which is a huge signal to the markets that this place is fucked up. So you don't really want to do that, right? They did it during the financial crisis when they had to.
Yeah.
So the real interest rate, to my view, to worry about is a 10-year, because that's where all these rates, mortgage
because
rates.
the Fed's been cutting the Fed funds, but the
Right.
10-year has been slowly climbing.
Right.
So that's more important
in my view, for consumer rates.
Okay.
And I studied economics. I'm not an economist, but that's how I view it.
Sure.
And I think most people do, and it could derail the Trump economic agenda if it hit 5.5. That would be a real problem. The question is, how do you keep it there? And do you keep it there with a combination of Powell not lowering rates right now? Maybe. Do you keep it there with that plus Doge, which takes? I mean, I can't imagine bond traders dislike the furloughing of all these government workers. I mean, this has got to be positive. This is what the bond market's been demanding for years. The U.S. government has been living beyond its means. Start cutting stuff.
Yeah.
Cut the size of government. Get rid of the education department or scale it down to nothing. I mean, this is what bond vigilantes want.
Right, but there's other people who don't want to cut government.
Well, who?
A lot of the Democrats don't.
Yeah, but they're not in power now.
That's a good point.
And if Trump understand, I think Bessent, who's a really smart market guy, if you know anything about his background,
Yeah.
he kind of gets that.
Incoming Treasury Secretary.
He's still rolling over short-term debt because he knows he has got a problem on his hands. Apparently someone told me the last auction was still heavily weighted to 2-year, short on the short end of the curve. So he kind of understands the box he's in. He's got $2 trillion in debt. You got a 10-year. You can want to get the economy going. You want to get the economy going so you get growth. When you do get growth, you get tax revenue. This is hard to explain, and who knows what's going to happen.
There's a lot of moving parts.
You really, you could only give scenarios, I think. I can't tell you where it's going to go. This is where I think it might go. And it's like, everything's interrelated. Suppose he does go hog wild on tariffs. Well, that's kind of a problem, right? I mean, that could be inflationary,
Will those prices most likely be passed along anyways to the consumer?
I mean, what does that do to the dollar? Does it make it stronger? Theoretically, right?
Yeah.
Takes more dollars to buy U.S. goods because there's a tariff if you want to buy U.S. goods, and therefore, if the dollar gets stronger, it could increase our trade deficit. I mean,
the domino effect affects earnings overseas because a lot of the large percentage of S&P 500 companies have international income.
Right, so they have to
so
to sell. So they need more. So to translate their profits into dollars, it costs more, right?
Yeah. You'll see that a company missed earnings, but it's because of the currency fluctuations. Yeah.
So I mean, all this stuff is interrelated, and it's it's a matrix. I don't know. I mean, I just know, some of the there is a plan right now to get that Bessent wants to get 3% growth. 3 million barrels a day of oil, and what was the other one? 3% of debt to GDP. He wants. The only way you get 3% of debt to GDP is to grow the economy.
Yeah. Do you think, by the way, we're talking with Charlie Gasparino, Go Woke, Go Broke. My T-shirt just again says Go Broke at the bottom. Other countries.
Glad you're wearing pants.
I know. It's a good thing I'm wearing pants. I usually
underwear.
Most of my Zoom. Anyway, other countries have lower rates.
Yeah.
and whether it's Japan, whether it's some countries in Europe.
ECB cut rates today.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think?
I mean, today we should point out.
They said the Fed is not political and will not give in. And I think in the last press conference, someone asked Powell, has Trump put any pressure? He says he hasn't spoken to him yet. Do you think Trump will put pressure on Powell to be more competitive with other countries to bring rates lower? And do you think if he does put pressure on him, he will cave into that?
He caved the last time. I mean, remember he started raising rates back in 2018?
Yeah.
Was it 20? I just remember the market.
Fall of 2018. That was the famous meme with Mnuchin on the phone. He called the banks.
Right.
Yeah,
But
but that wasn't that high. They went from 0 to like 2 and a quarter.
Trump started going nuts, and then he stopped.
Because the fourth quarter of 18, the market dropped.
Yeah, no,
it was right around Christmas they stopped.
I just remember that. And then this Trump started yelling at him or tweeting about him, and he stopped. So he's not immune to pressure. So we want why do we want our rates lower than in tandem with Britain? Why do we need that?
I don't know if he's mentioned to be competitive with other countries.
Why are we competitive if our Fed funds rate is lower?
I don't know. Maybe Trump just knows lower rates in general. People love free money, but that can be. It was not inflationary when they kept rates low. It was when a lot of the stimulus came in around COVID. That's because you have, the government keeping rates low did not affect inflation at all. Inflation for like 15 years.
By the way, we had higher rates and we still had job growth.
Right.
I just wonder, does it really matter?
No, I mean, on average, the 10-year has historically been 5%.
No, but you're talking about the Fed funds or the 10-year?
I mean, they've been around.
The 10-year is not controlled by the Fed.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I'm talking about them interchangeably.
So
You're right.
if Trump is not talking about the 10-year, he doesn't understand economics like that. He's a businessman. He thinks that if the Fed lowers rates, the 10-year yield will go down, and it might not.
It hasn't so far.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And because there's still inflationary pressures or worries, and there's still a lot of debt to be sold. So remember, this is a matrix, and Best and Guarantees understands all of this. There's one guy that knows about these markets in that granular detail. It's that guy, based on what I know about him, and I don't know him. I've never met him, but I know people that are friends with him, and he's a pretty sharp guy.
Yeah. What was your? I mean, I don't know if you've inspired me to write a book because I know it's just a huge accomplishment. What's your proudest when you finish a book, and this one in particular? Is there like your proudest part of it, or just to be done with it, or the feedback you get? Or
well, you just and you just wish you wrote it differently. Sometimes you're never really satisfied.
I was going to ask that. Is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, little things. Just not like stuff like. Not material, just stuff that sticks in my craw. Maybe I should have wrote that differently. Maybe I should have done that.
Yeah.
But that's part of like the process, because if you're not thinking, part of writing a book is rewriting it 15 times, which I did.
Yeah.
I rewrote this thing 15
I know you did, yeah.
And, just that's part of the process. So I could probably rewrite it again right now and again and again. At some point, you got to put down the pen, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But, I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment. Any advice? I was going to ask for two parts for anyone wanting to write a book or young journalists. I mean, you've been incredibly successful. You've broken so many stories. I mean, I remember during the global financial crisis, you were literally moving markets with every story. I mean, it was like 10 times a day from 5 a.m. till 9 p.m. breaking stories. Any advice? Let's start with journalists. People want to get into media, want to report, want to do any sort of TV media, stuff like that.
The business is really a different business than when I started. I mean, this is an imploding business right now, or shifting to something like this.
To podcasts.
Or YouTube or Twitter. I will say this. I've trained now. Most of the kids that train with me have done very well. Yeah. One works at the Journal, one works at the Post and does tons of TV.
Yeah.
Another one worked at Bloomberg, one of the top fintech reporters in the business.
Yeah.
And then she wrote her own newsletter and made a ton of money selling it. Another one is now one of the top field producers. At Fox, my current producer, Ellie Terrett, is like the queen of crypto reporting.
Oh, yeah, she's
one of the top.
Big in crypto, yeah.
And I taught all of them simple stuff like, add value, break news, and add value. You're not me, so you shouldn't be, you shouldn't be like opining. This is like breaking news. Learn how to walk before you run. So before you tackle like a huge feature, give me a straight news story that breaks news, and do it a lot, write every day. And if you kind of do that, understanding how to add value, kind of write every day, you'll grow as a journalist. You can do different things, and if you add value, you'll get jobs. And I don't know where you'll get a job. Elon might create a news service for all I know, but if you break news and you move stocks, you shouldn't try to move stocks, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You add value where it has impact, and all those people I mentioned do. You'll work in this business. So I would start in that with that in mind, and you don't have to write the great American investigative report. You got to break news and write clearly. And sort of learn your craft. I think too many kids, they get out of Columbia Business Journalism School and they want to write about Trump. Try writing about what's going on in New York State or New York City.
Yeah.
Try to write about the markets. Break stories about that give financial people a leg up. That help that help facilitate the capital formation process. It is a worthy endeavor. And you will have a place, and you'll be hired. And drop the wokeness. I mean, I don't care what they told you in college. Just drop it. It's bullshit. It's a failed ideology. It's not going to do you any good. This business is one of the problems with journalism. It's gone so woke that people don't. Why would you read the New York Times?
Well, I think that's a big reason when you said things have changed in media, both in written newspapers, and if you ask a normal just person on the street, is there a news channel you trust?
Yeah.
Most people would say no.
I don't blame them.
I mean, back in the day, not that long ago, like I remember around 9/11, people tuned into CNN.
Yeah.
There was no wokeness or political
and
stuff.
they're trying to go back to the center, by the way. I know that.
Right, but that was just, I remember like not that long ago, you turn on CNN for news, or if something was going on in the world.
I hate to tout the Fox, but because I work there, I just don't want to seem like I'm totally in the bag, but I am. Fox has it, I think, kind of right. Regular news, where it's news. Our news reporters are straight. Brett Baer, Eric Shawn, you name it. And we have our opinion guys at the end of the day. I mean, that sort of separation of church and state is the way it should be.
Right.
The Post is the same way. It's got the editorial page, but it runs a lot of stuff. It's got news.
But I think now for people who, and I'm not picking on any channel, but in general, if they don't trust television media, print media, whatever,
the media
it's shifted to podcasts.
Well, the media just went way too far, most of it.
Yes.
If you look at the business metrics of like a successful print product, like the New York Times, right? Yeah. Look at their balance sheet. Tell me how successful are they really? You would think based on, they're killing it on ad revenue and this and that. I mean, this is a mid-sized business at best that if you look closely at the metrics, I don't see growth there. I mean, are they really going to grow based on Wordle and, me paying for the cooking part of it?
Yeah.
I like their recipes, by the way, because I like to cook. But do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. If you look at their balance sheet, that's not a growth business. Not by growth metrics.
Meanwhile, Spotify, I started doing this podcast. Spotify was 400 a share, over 600 now.
Yeah, no, for obvious. By the way, I've met with the Spotify people. They're really smart.
Yeah.
They understand their business model. They also understand that you go woke, you go broke. Remember, they stood up for Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
They stood up for a lot of conservatives.
So
they're actually that's actually a business that I would say is a growth business.
It's growing they went from 100 to over 700 million.
Have you ever cracked the New York Times balance sheet?
No, I've not.
I would, just for the hell of it. And
yeah.
Because everybody says, they're doing so great, they're killing it. Just look at what great means in journalism today.
Yeah.
It's not great.
I have to dig into it, but from what I understand, do you feel that with people not trusting certain mediums that they go, I mean, a lot of people have said podcasts affected the election. It wasn't just Musk, Vance, and Trump in 1 week going on Rogan. It was also Harris not going on, or the younger demographic with Theo Vaughn. I know Trump's son said go on some of the younger podcasts that the younger audience listened to. Do you think that will continue to have an effect on news, elections, what people choose to tune into?
Yeah, I think new media will. I mean, there's got to be something that replaces podcasts at some point, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think if you add value in some way, if you tell people how to turn a dime into maybe $1, I think people will tune in. If you proselytize, if you try to brainwash, if you try to promote your agenda, if it's if you're trying to like push your ideas, not trying to help someone get through the day by learning something, well, then I don't know if there's a business model for that, because there's so much competition. I was listening to Victor Hanson Davis, who actually has a good podcast. He's, I guess you might say, a conservative columnist, and he's actually a brilliant historian. He's at the Hoover Institute. He's got a PhD from Stanford in history. He was talking with Jack Fowler, who used to be the editor of the publisher of the National Review, another guy I know, about how Trump might cut off funding to NPR and PBS. And they were saying, if you think about it, why was NPR and PBS created before both of them went very woke, out on? Well, it was created as an alternative to, the sort of, blasé, AM radio, FM music radio, and, the networks, which was kind of like, prosaic programming, right? So you had these two things that people, kind of edgy and, intellectual. Then they turned incredibly, left wing with a political bias. So people want to cut them off. And a lot of the backlash is, well, if you cut off PBS and NPR, where will you be able to get that sentiment? You can get it anywhere.
Yeah.
If you want real lefty stuff that they're promoting, go to Netflix. It's there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's there. There's no need for PBS and NPR anymore. There's really no need for it. And, they might be able to survive with corporate donations from George Soros, and maybe that's what it'll take. But that's how they should survive, not with taxpayer money, because there's no need for them from a sort of societal basis. I mean, that's where they were created. They were created before, by good government types saying people need this. This is much needed. They break people away from the garbage that's on network TV. But they don't need it anymore because you can break away. That's what streaming is about. Right?
No more Sesame Street, or do we just move Sesame Street to Netflix?
Well, I mean, is there not a Netflix Sesame
I'm sure it's on there anyways.
But isn't there like something like Sesame Street on there?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Any closing thoughts? Any sort of final comments? I mean, everyone go out and get this book. It's a great read. Go Woke, Go Broke. Charlie's 6th book, and it's an incredible accomplishment.
I would just say that, buckle up this year and next year and for the next 4 years, and don't assume the sky is falling on everything. I've never been a huge Trumper. I actually personally like the guy. Like, I know him.
No, I know. We ran into him at a concert one time, and he said hi to you. He walked right by with Melania and said, "Hey, Charlie, how are you?" And I was like, "What is going?" That was the worst Trump impression ever. But
who is this elegant woman who is as elegant as Jackie O back in the day?
Yeah.
And why don't we see her on these magazine covers?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing. It just shows you just the institutional woke hatred in sort of media for this for these people. And I would just say that Donald, I disagree with him on things. I don't like his attitude sometimes and how he January 6th I don't think was a very good look. That said, he ran the country pretty well the first time. If you took out some of his his low parts, I mean, the economy ran well. We were respected across the world. He's net doing a pretty damn good job now. He's doing all the stuff he needs
in a very short period of time.
Short period of time. He's not imposing tariffs across the board. He's not like destroying global trade. He's reducing the size of government, which needs to be reduced. He's putting the country's stature back together, which was decimated. It's going to be a little crazy because he's shaking stuff up. Just don't assume the worst every time. Let this play out because, there is a method to his madness. I look at it this way. Do you remember during the debate? They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. Okay, so when he says this, I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck is he talking about?
I know.
And then he goes, they're eating the pets of the people that live there. And I was like, oh my God. I couldn't help it. And she's like, come on. I was like,
it took a lot of people by surprise.
Anyway, the next day I said, well, let me look up. Are they eating cats and dogs? Well, the reality is, you find out that in this town of Springfield, it's like a small city, right? It's like 40,000 people. Like in a year or something, this very short, it's like 20,000 people came into their town from a different culture. I mean, it was like they didn't have the social service networks. They didn't have the hospital system. They had a school system. They had nothing. And it just like took the social fabric of this town and turned it upside down. And maybe there was somebody that cat. I don't know if they eat cats. Maybe they eat dogs in Haiti. I have no idea. But there was something that he got at some inherent truth that we shouldn't be telling the American people to accept vast cultural change for no reason. Do we need people from poor people from all over the world come here when we have so many poor people in this country? And by the way, immigrants will say that as well, as you know.
Yes.
And we don't. And so it's, there is an inherent, he gets to the kind of the right point, with this whole thing with Gaza saying that America's going to take it over, throw them all out. Or, if you really listen to what he said, he goes, listen, the Palestinian people in Gaza have been trapped by Hamas, who Israel is forced to fight, including this time after a horrific terrorist attack, and they're like cannon fodder. Just get them out of it. And by the way, they're returning to rubble. Why should they be forced to live like that? There are countries in that region with a lot of money who could give them housing somewhere. It's not the most absurd thing because what we've been dealing with for the last 50 years has been insanity, right? So he says this stuff, everybody freaks out, and then all of a sudden they start thinking, well, maybe he's kind of got a point. What is the solution here? Just more fighting every day, Hamas.
But at least working on some solution is better than...
Or talking about it and coming to terms with something different. So, I mean, just remember, that's the kind of the guy, he's got this guttural sense. He's got a crudeness to him that doesn't play well. But he's not stupid. He's actually pretty smart. So I would just say buckle up and just, don't lose your the markets went nuts on the Canadian trade. And remember, he threatened tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Yeah. And then the next day the markets were up because, he reversed it. He said, okay, no problem. You're going to put 10,000 troops on the border. That's all I want. We're done.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just for negotiation tactics.
So why go nuts? So if you dumped all your stocks, you lost a ton of money.
Yeah.
Because, Trump's doing the tariffs.
I think it'll definitely be a little bit more volatile, but overall we're still in a bull market. Like going back to earnings and interest rates move. If interest rates are stable, earnings continue to grow. Bull market driven by AI.
A really smart guy who called me up the other day and said, listen, I think you're underestimating how all these deportations are going to affect inflation. I go, come on. He goes, well, I'm hearing it's much more successful than you think. They're throwing people out of the country left and right. There's going to be labor shortages. And I said, okay, you mean to tell me that we have a 60% labor participation rate in this country right now, and we can't get people to take jobs that illegal immigrants are taking, working off the books? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, Warren Buffett, I'll leave it with this. Warren Buffett had a famous line. He says, if you mix your investing with your politics, you're making a big mistake.
Huge mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake.
And unfortunately, too many people, either side, if you hate one side, you're going to hate everything. And if you like one side, but they're mixing, that's where you have to separate those emotions and your political
and
views.
remember, the economy is different than the markets.
Yes.
I mean, the economy, I would posit, wasn't great under Joe Biden. I thought his policy screwed up the economy, which I think they did in many ways. We had, but they were very good for the market. So you had a class of people that did very well with high inflation and low interest rates when it was low. And even when they had to raise them, you had speculators doing very well.
Yeah.
Average people did horribly because of inflation. So remember,
Agree.
and I there was a time when I didn't see that. I knew the economy would be bad. I thought the markets would reflect the economy, but they don't always. So
No,
remember, this is a different matrix.
There can be a big disconnect. Thank you for doing this interview. Thank you, more importantly, for being a great mentor and a great friend. Appreciate you. We'll have to do a part 2 soon and talk a little bit more markets and
Maybe the Super Bowl.
maybe talk Super Bowl and some other fascinating topics. But thank you so much for being here. Everyone go out, get the book. It's an amazing read, and thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Good job.